From day one, we are told who we should be, how to live, and what's acceptable. Before we even have a chance to discover ourselves, our society has already drawn those lines for us. But what happens when those lines are keeping us from knowing and embracing who we truly are? Welcome to Unbox Yourself with Samantha Fox, a podcast about unpacking and unlearning everything that's kept you from living as your true self. Through honest conversations about your internal emotional landscape, sexuality, coming out later in life, relationships, and the journey to self-acceptance, we break free from the boxes we never chose. On today's episode of Unbox Yourself with Samantha Fox, I'm going to be talking a little bit about something that makes so many of us uncomfortable, and that is grief, grieving, feeling down, feeling sad, really struggling. And the reason I want to talk about this today is because this journey of being a late in life queer, lesbian, gay person, discovering yourself and your authentic identity, sexuality, later comes with a lot of loss. So while this new door is opening and there are so many exciting things to discover about yourself that you never even knew were possible, you at the very same time are losing many things about yourself that you have known and you have identified with, that you have felt gave you purpose and helped you feel grounded in who you are in your day-to-day life up until now. So a few days ago, a woman reached out to me on one of the social platforms, and she asked if I had any support resources for when you already have kids with a man and you're not coming out until after you've already had the kids and your entire life unraveling and how to make it through with your kids. This made me start to think about how many times I've been asked this question, how many of you out there I have worked with through your own journey of having a family, having a marriage, sometimes a very, very long-term marriage with somebody that you respect and who is one of your closest friends and somebody you deeply love, and realizing that you are gay. And at that point, what do you do? And that's essentially what this woman seemed to be asking was, did you already have kids when you came out, and how do you get through that time? The topic that comes up for me around this is grief. And that might mean for many people that they are just not willing to step onto this path and onto this journey because the loss and the grieving that is involved is requiring a lot of energy and processing time and a lot of spaciousness, really, and grace with yourself to have all of those feelings so you can get through them and move beyond them. And that's not to say that they won't sometimes turn around and come back to get you again. And I'm going to share a little bit of my own journey with grieving. The majority of my grieving during my coming out process happened after I physically separated from my husband at that time and moved in with my catalyst, who was my partner. And suddenly my entire life had been turned upside down. So I had been living one life for maybe about 11 or 12 years. And I was now in my own home with this new partner, with my 3 kids who were going back and forth. And I felt very ungrounded and like I couldn't get my feet on the floor. At this point, I was about 35 years old. So I had come out about 3 years before that. But I was 35 years old and I had to start doing things I had never done before. I had been a stay-at-home mom. My husband, when I was married to him, he took care of all the finances, all of the income. We had a very traditional marriage. And I now had to figure out everything about being an adult and being on my own 2 feet, and also figure out how I was going to be self-supporting in the amount of time that was laid out in my divorce agreement. So needless to say, I was in, I would say, a great deal of survival mode with a lot of fear. I knew I could not stay married. That was not an option for me. I am somebody who really struggles to pretend. So once I know something and I am connected to it, I can't pretend something else. So in other words, I've always been gay, but I consciously did not know that. So I was not really pretending because I did not know consciously that I was gay. Once it came to consciousness, I no longer could pretend that I was not gay. And so I left the marriage, was very excited to step into my authenticity and feel all of the places I had been disembodied start to fill out with myself. And I also was feeling a lot of fear about what the future held for me, which was uncertain and unknown, as it is for all of us. Though while I was married, I felt like there was some security around my future, and suddenly that had been taken away from me. And so I had uncertainty, and I had a new relationship while I was going through all of this. And my grieving hit me at that moment. And I felt like I lost everything. I lost my kids part of the time. I lost the security of, a heteronormative life, really a very beautiful heteronormative life. If you looked at it from the outside, it would have been the life that anybody would have dreamed of. And my ex-husband was not a bad person. He was, I think he really did love me in the ways that he had the ability to. And he was a generous person, and he certainly did the best that he could. So none of this was his fault that he landed in this situation with me. And so there was a lot of grieving on my end. I had somebody who now really strongly disliked me and thought I was evil, my ex-husband, plus a lot of contingencies in my divorce agreement that I had to uphold and live by, and felt like I was under a magnifying glass a lot of the time. And it was a struggle. It was really a struggle. So I would say I lived in a great deal of survival mode for most of the years after I exited that marriage. I lived in survival mode for many reasons that other folks that I have worked with that have left their marriages might not have experienced, because they may have been the breadwinner, or they may have been an equal income earner to their spouse. And while things changed, they didn't have the fear of figuring out how were they going to support themselves, because I had been a stay-at-home mom. So there are many variations on this theme in terms of what it can look like when you actually do leave, because you do want to be embodied and you do want to be authentic to who you are. Mine was particularly survival mode oriented, and I lived in a lot of survival mode for many, many, many years after. Though, in my life, being a gay woman, I would say I was not in survival mode. That was a place I found I could thrive. I could feel connected. I had support. I had many loves. I had many relationships, long-term relationships. And while none of them lasted, a traditional lifelong, you're one and always person, I have developed really deep connections with the people that I was with my past partners. And I still am very connected to all of them except for my catalyst, the very first one. So I digress a little bit. What I really wanted to talk about was the grieving and the sadness and the loss of what I had left behind me hit me when I first left and for those first few years after that, which was part of why my relationship with my first partner, who I met while I was still married, did not end up working, because we entered the relationship from two very different perspectives. To me, I entered the relationship with her and my entire life was blowing up and falling apart. And I felt no ground beneath my feet. And for her, she was younger than me. She felt like her life was coming together for the first time ever. And she had more ground beneath her feet than she had ever had before. So we were in very different places and we really couldn't find a shared reality around this. And that was really a struggle. But the grieving was intense and it pulled me, I would say, away from her. And in hindsight, sometimes people will say, are there regrets or do you wish you did things differently? There are so many things I wish I had done differently. And I also forgive myself, and I have a lot of compassion for where I was and how old I was and how mature I was and what I knew back then. And I made plenty of mistakes and I learned from them. So I have regrets about how this all happened. I have regrets about the way I went about it with my ex-husband, because I think I could have been a lot more gentle with him than I was. And the biggest piece was that I wish that I had realized my authentic sexuality with this person who helped me wake up to it and let her know that I need to put that to the side until I get through this family business. And if she's still around, great, we'll connect afterwards. But I wish I had not stayed in that relationship for those years. It took me 3 years to get through our litigation, and we lived together for those 3 years. And I wish I had released her and not been in a relationship and been single during that time. And at the same time, I'm not sure how I would have gotten through that time alone. And she was a big support for me. So, hindsight is 2020, right? But back to grieving. I did a lot of grieving when we first separated and I was living with my partner. Our relationship fell apart after a couple of years after we moved in together. And then my grieving went into a bit of some kind of like a hiding place. And for many years, I was just building. I was building my career. It was parenting, building my career, and having a partner. And my partners always lived long distance. So I would see them every couple of weeks on a weekend and whatnot. And that was how I lived many years of my life. And I was not very connected to the grieving until my father got ill in the end of 2023 and passed away in 2024. And then I started a whole nother cycle of grieving where everything came up, not just the grieving of losing your second parent and your father, but all that I had lived through, started to come back up. And I felt like I lost the ground underneath me again. So it was reliving that trauma, that first trauma, again with more intensity. And I took this past year, it's been a little bit more than a year now, year and a month, to truly make space for my grieving. I made sure intentionally that I was not in a relationship, so I didn't have to worry about anybody else or their needs aside from my children. And I have cried and cried and cried, every day about so much loss and what a journey this has been. Now, I came out in 2002. It is now 2025. I still feel grief. I still cry sometimes. I still remember things and they catch me and I shed tears. Grieving is a lifelong journey. It's not something that you lean into for a month and then you're done. I want to talk about that just in terms of how we are really like allergic to grieving in our society, how we don't know what to do with people who are grieving. We don't know how to talk to them and how to support them. We kind of don't really want to be around them. We don't want to talk about really hard things and get pulled down by them. This is really a society that focuses on happiness. How do you get happy? How are you going to be happy all the time? What things are you doing to stay happy? And there is nothing wrong with happiness, but there also is nothing wrong with grief and sadness and loss. And there is no way to live a life and not touch grief and loss, because life is about loss. Every day that you are alive is one day that has gone by in your life, and you can't get that day back. Every minute you breathe is a minute you've been alive and has passed. So our living and breathing is essentially us losing at the same time. It is an inherent part of being human that there is loss. And we somehow still really don't know what to do with this feeling of grieving. And I work with a lot of folks that end up getting sick or feeling really depressed, having a ton of anxiety, having a lot of shame or guilt, because they are not allowing the feelings of grief to wash through them so that they actually can feel them and process them and move through and get to the other side. So for those of you out there that are listening to this, that are trying to figure out, how do I get through this? I have a family. I have kids. How can I do this? I'm going to tell you the way you're possibly able to do this is by allowing yourself to feel the loss of all the identities you had that you will not have in the same way, because you will be starting to build different and new identities, right? So when something dies, something is born. This is the life cycle. You are going to get through this because you are going to lean into the life cycle and what is natural. That's how you're going to get through this. Let people know you're grieving. Let them know what they can do to support you. Ask them if they're okay with that and they're comfortable with that. If they're not, find a counselor or somebody, a book or a place where you can be supported in your grieving and shedding. You are shedding like a snake sheds its skin so it can become a bigger snake. You're becoming a bigger version of yourself, a more embodied version of yourself. But that means leaving the old skins behind. And you can have all the feelings you have about that. That is totally valid. But you cannot move through this process of coming out later without allowing those feelings to happen if you want to move through it in the most healthy way possible. So I am encouraging you to lean into the feelings and validate them and be with yourself and know that all of those parts of yourself that are feeling all of those things are valid, and to love them and to appreciate them and to forgive them and to embrace them so that you can move through this and become who you actually are. It is sad that we have to go through all of this to be who we are. And this all comes, honestly, from our patriarchal society. If we never had compulsory heterosexuality as a construct, there would not be homophobia. If there were not homophobia, there would not be internalized homophobia. And people would be able to be who they are whenever they found it would be okay. There is this compounded grieving and doing something terrible feeling about coming out later after you have kids and you have a family. I just want to let you know, while everybody will struggle going through this process, they all will come out the other side and have learned a great deal. My own children included. They have learned so much. I've worked with folks whose children are on the other side and they have grown. They realize they are resilient. They can get through things. Don't stop your process of growth into who you are so that your husband and your children don't have to go through anything hard. Life is not meant to be on a cotton ball. We are meant to have bumps. We are meant to have waves and tidal waves and sometimes tsunamis, and ride those out and wash up on shore and dust ourselves off and figure out how to keep going and not make the same mistakes again next time. So I am here to say your grieving, your feelings of sadness or and loss are so valid. They are to be loved and to be held. And if there's a way to find gratitude for them, they are helping you grow into a bigger and more embodied you. So love them, embrace them. And if you need somebody to talk to about them, you can reach out to me or reach out to somebody in your area that knows how to support people on their journey of grieving. Grieving is just part of life. Thanks for listening in. Thank you for spending this time with me on Unbox Yourself with Samantha Fox. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps more folks find these conversations. If you're ready to unbox from something that's keeping you stuck, I would love to support you. You can find the application to the show at unboxyoursexuality.com. Let's stay connected. Find me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Lesbian Curiosity Coach. Give me a follow and join the conversation. Remember, we only have this one time through. Why not unbox yourself and let your true self shine in all its beautiful glory?